My sister-in-law got arrested for impersonating child services to terrorize me during pregnancy because she wanted to adopt my baby, but even after she got out of prison she violated her restraining order and showed up at my house. I'm Jessica, 28F, and I need to share what happened to me during my pregnancy. My husband Oscar, 29M, and I have been together for 6 years, married for 3. We live in a small ranch house in Ohio that we bought 2 years ago. Oscar works as an electrician and I teach 2nd grade at the local elementary school. When I got pregnant with our first baby, we were over the moon. We had been trying for 8 months and finally got our positive test in January. Oscar immediately started converting our spare room into a nursery. He painted the walls yellow since we wanted to be surprised about the gender. Every weekend for 2 months, he worked on building a crib from scratch and installing safety latches on all the cabinets. The pregnancy went smoothly until week 32. That's when everything started falling apart, though I didn't know it at the time. Let me back up and explain something important about Oscar. When he was 19, he got arrested for stealing a car. It wasn't really stealing. His friend Jake had borrowed his older brother's car without permission and Oscar didn't know. They got pulled over and both got charged. Oscar took a plea deal for misdemeanor theft and did 100 hours of community service. This happened 9 years ago. Since then, Oscar has never had so much as a speeding ticket. He doesn't even drink beer anymore because he said he learned his lesson. The incident happened on a Thursday afternoon in March. I had just gotten home from my last parent-teacher conferences before spring break. I was exhausted and my feet were swollen, so I was lying on the couch when someone knocked on our front door. The knock was loud and persistent, not like a neighbor or delivery person. I opened the door to find a woman who looked to be in her 50s. She wore a navy blue blazer and carried a brown leather folder. She introduced herself as Margaret from the Department of Children's Services. She said she needed to speak with me and Oscar about a report they had received. Margaret explained that someone had called their hotline claiming that Oscar was using drugs in our home and that this posed a risk to our unborn baby. She mentioned his previous arrest and said they had to take all reports seriously, especially when there was a criminal history involved. I invited her inside because I knew we had nothing to hide. Oscar came home from work about 20 minutes later and found us sitting at our kitchen table. Margaret had been asking me questions about Oscar's work schedule, our finances, and whether I had noticed any changes in his behavior. When Oscar walked in, his work boots were muddy and his uniform had electrical tape stuck to it. Margaret looked him up and down and made notes in her folder. She asked him to sit down and started questioning him about his daily routine. She wanted to know where he went after work, who his friends were, and whether he had been in contact with Jake, the friend from his arrest. Oscar answered every question calmly. He explained that he comes straight home after work every day. His lunch break is spent at the job site with his coworkers. On weekends, he works on house projects or we visit his parents who live about 40 minutes away. He hasn't spoken to Jake in over 5 years. Margaret then said she needed to inspect our house. She went through every room, opening closets and drawers. In the nursery, she examined the crib Oscar had built and asked why we had chosen not to find out the baby's gender. She looked through our medicine cabinet and asked about the prenatal vitamins I was taking. After the inspection, Margaret informed us that we both needed to take drug tests immediately. She said there was a lab across town that stayed open until 8 p.m. and we needed to go that day. We drove there separately, Oscar in his work truck and me following behind in our car. The drug test process took about an hour. We had to wait in a small room with plastic chairs while they processed our samples. Oscar kept checking his phone and tapping his foot on the linoleum floor. I filled out paperwork about my pregnancy and listed all the medications I was taking. Margaret called me 3 days later while I was at school. I had to step out of my classroom during lunch to take the call. She said both our drug tests came back negative and the home inspection didn't reveal any concerns. I started to thank her when she cut me off. She said that despite the clean tests, there was still a high probability that the hospital would place a hold on our baby when it was born. She explained that because of Oscar's criminal record and the nature of the original report, other agencies might get involved. She said it wouldn't be her decision and that we would have to wait and see what happened at the hospital. I sat in my empty classroom after that call and stared at the bulletin board covered with my students' artwork. The baby kicked hard against my ribs like she was trying to get my attention. That night, I couldn't sleep. Oscar was snoring beside me but I kept thinking about what Margaret had said. At 2 a.m., I got up and went to our computer. I found a legal advice forum online and typed out our entire story. The responses started coming within minutes. Most people were telling me to get a lawyer immediately. Several users said they worked in child services or knew people who did. They pointed out things that didn't make sense about Margaret's visit. One person said that in Ohio, child services typically doesn't investigate pregnant women unless they already have children in their care. Another person said that hospitals can't just take babies without a court order or clear evidence of immediate danger. Multiple people suggested I verify that Margaret actually worked for the department. I printed out the most helpful responses and showed them to Oscar when he woke up. He read through them while drinking his coffee and eating the scrambled eggs I had made. When he finished reading, he set the papers down and said we needed to call a lawyer that morning. Oscar's uncle had used a family lawyer named Robert Chen a few years ago for his divorce. I called Mr. Chen's office as soon as they opened and explained that we had an emergency situation. His secretary squeezed us in for an appointment that afternoon. Mr. Chen listened to our story without interrupting. He took notes on a yellow legal pad and asked us to repeat certain details. When we finished talking, he said the whole situation sounded irregular for our state. The first thing Mr. Chen did was call the local Department of Children's Services office. He explained that he was representing us and asked to speak with the supervisor about our case. He gave them our names and asked about the investigation being handled by Margaret. Mr. Chen put the call on speaker so we could hear. After being on hold for several minutes, the supervisor came back on the line. She said they had no employee named Margaret in their department. She also said they had no open case involving our family and had never received any reports about us. Mr. Chen thanked the supervisor and hung up the phone. He looked at both of us and said we needed to go to the police station immediately. Someone had been impersonating a government worker, which was a serious crime. We drove straight to the police station from Mr. Chen's office. The officer who took our report was named Detective Williams. She had us describe Margaret in detail, her height, hair color, the type of car she drove, and exactly what she had said during her visit. Detective Williams explained that impersonating a public servant was a felony in Ohio. She said they would start investigating right away and asked us to call immediately if Margaret tried to contact us again. That evening, I called my obstetrician's office and spoke with the nurse. I explained the situation and asked them to make a note in my file about the imposter. The nurse said she would alert the hospital security and make sure our delivery team was aware of the potential threat. We also decided to stay at Oscar's parents' house until after the baby was born. We packed our hospital bags and drove to their place that night. Oscar's mom, Linda, made up the guest room and insisted on making us dinner even though we had already eaten. Our daughter Emma was born 2 weeks later at the hospital. The security team had Margaret's description and kept an extra watch on the maternity ward. Emma arrived healthy after a long but normal labor. Oscar cried when he held her for the first time, which made me cry too. We stayed at the hospital for 2 days and then went back to Oscar's parents' house. Linda had prepared the guest room with a bassinet and all the baby supplies we needed. She helped me learn how to breastfeed and showed Oscar how to change diapers properly. 3 days after Emma was born, Detective Williams called with an update. They had arrested someone in connection with our case. She said we needed to come to the station to identify the suspect in a lineup. Update 1: the person they arrested was someone I never expected. It was my sister-in-law Kelly, 26F, Oscar's younger sister. When Detective Williams told us the suspect's name, Oscar just stared at her. He asked her to repeat it because he said he must have heard wrong. But she confirmed it was Kelly who had been impersonating the child services worker. Kelly had been arrested at her apartment across town. The police found the navy blazer and brown folder she had used during her visit to our house. They also found printed pages with information about child services procedures that she had apparently researched online. During questioning, Kelly admitted to everything. She said she had been the one who called the child services hotline to make the false report about Oscar using drugs. She had also been the one who came to our house pretending to be Margaret. Detective Williams explained that Kelly's motivation was complicated. According to her confession, Kelly believed that Oscar was not ready to be a father because of his past arrest. She thought that if child services got involved, we would realize we weren't prepared for a baby and would consider other options. Kelly also admitted that she had been struggling financially and had hoped that if we decided not to keep the baby, she could adopt it herself. She had been trying to get pregnant with her boyfriend for over a year without success and had been seeing a fertility specialist. Oscar didn't say anything during the meeting with Detective Williams. He just sat in the plastic chair and looked at his hands. When we got back to his parents' house, he went straight to the guest room and closed the door. Linda was in the kitchen feeding Emma a bottle when I told her what had happened. She set the bottle down on the counter and sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs. She said she couldn't believe Kelly would do something like this. Oscar's dad, Frank, came home from work about an hour later. Linda told him about Kelly's arrest while he was still standing in the doorway with his lunch cooler in his hand. Frank set the cooler down and went to find Oscar in the guest room. I could hear them talking through the closed door, but I couldn't make out the words. Frank's voice was low and steady, and Oscar's responses were short. They talked for about 30 minutes before Frank came back out. The next day, Linda went to visit Kelly in jail. She was gone for most of the afternoon and came back looking tired. She said Kelly had been crying and kept saying she was sorry. Kelly claimed she never meant for things to go as far as they did. According to Linda, Kelly said she had only planned to make the initial phone call to child services. She thought they would just do a quick check and then close the case. But when nothing happened after a few days, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Kelly had researched child services procedures online and found old employee directories to create her fake identity. She had practiced what she would say and even bought the blazer and folder at a thrift store to look more official. Linda said Kelly kept asking if Oscar and I would visit her in jail. She wanted to explain herself and apologize in person. Linda told her that probably wasn't going to happen anytime soon. Oscar finally started talking to his parents about the situation after Linda's jail visit. He said he felt stupid for not recognizing his own sister, even though she had worn her hair differently and used a different tone of voice during her visit. Frank pointed out that people don't expect family members to lie to them in such an elaborate way. He said Oscar had no reason to question whether Margaret was really a government worker because the idea that it could be Kelly was so far outside the realm of possibility. We stayed at Oscar's parents' house for another week while we figured out what to do next. Emma was sleeping well and gaining weight, which the pediatrician said was exactly what we wanted to see. Oscar and I talked about whether we wanted to press charges against Kelly. The district attorney said we could choose not to pursue the case since it was a family matter, but Detective Williams recommended that we follow through with the prosecution. The charges against Kelly included impersonating a public servant, filing a false report, and harassment. If convicted, she could face up to 3 years in prison and significant fines. Linda asked us to consider Kelly's mental state and the fact that she had been struggling with infertility. She suggested that Kelly might benefit from counseling rather than jail time. Frank disagreed and said Kelly needed to face consequences for her actions. Oscar made the decision to proceed with pressing charges. He said that what Kelly had done wasn't just a prank or a misunderstanding. She had terrorized us during the final weeks of my pregnancy and put our family at risk. We moved back to our own house when Emma was 3 weeks old. Oscar installed new locks on all the doors and bought a security camera for the front porch. He said he wanted to make sure Kelly couldn't come back and try something else. Kelly's trial was scheduled for 2 months later. The public defender assigned to her case contacted us about the possibility of a plea deal. Kelly was willing to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. Update 2: Kelly's trial took place on a Tuesday morning in May. Oscar and I had to testify about what happened during her visit to our house and how her actions affected us. Kelly pleaded guilty to all charges as part of her plea agreement. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison with the possibility of parole after serving half the sentence. She also had to pay restitution for our legal fees and attend counseling sessions. During the sentencing hearing, Kelly's lawyer asked if she could make a statement. Kelly stood up and apologized to Oscar and me. She said she knew what she had done was wrong and that she regretted putting us through such a difficult time. Kelly explained that she had been desperate to have a baby and hadn't been thinking clearly. She said the fertility treatments had been affecting her emotionally and she had made poor decisions as a result. She asked Oscar to forgive her someday, even if he couldn't do it right away. Oscar didn't respond to Kelly's statement in court. When the judge asked if we wanted to say anything, Oscar just shook his head. I told the judge that we appreciated Kelly's apology but that her actions had caused lasting damage to our family. After the sentencing, Linda approached us in the courthouse hallway. She said she understood if we needed space from the family for a while. She asked if she could still visit Emma occasionally because she didn't want to lose her relationship with her granddaughter. Oscar told his mom that she was welcome to visit Emma anytime. He said that what Kelly had done wasn't Linda's fault and he didn't want Emma to miss out on having a relationship with her grandmother. Frank was less understanding of the situation. He said Kelly had embarrassed the family and made it difficult for everyone to move forward. He stopped visiting Kelly in jail after her sentencing and refused to discuss her release date. We found out more details about Kelly's planning during the trial. The prosecution presented evidence that she had been researching our case for weeks before making the initial phone call to Child Services. Kelly had created fake social media accounts to monitor our posts about the pregnancy. She had also driven by our house multiple times to observe our daily routines. The level of premeditation involved in her plan was more extensive than we had initially realized. The most disturbing revelation was that Kelly had been in contact with adoption agencies in other states. She had inquired about private adoptions and asked about the process for adopting a baby whose birth parents changed their minds. Kelly's boyfriend, Marcus, testified that he had no knowledge of her plans. He said Kelly had been acting strangely for several months but he attributed it to stress from their fertility treatments. Marcus broke up with Kelly after her arrest and moved out of their shared apartment. Detective Williams told us that Kelly's case was unusual because family members rarely go to such elaborate lengths to deceive each other. She said most impersonation cases involve strangers trying to commit fraud or gain access to homes for theft. The strain of the trial affected Oscar's relationship with his parents. Linda continued to visit Kelly in prison and wanted to discuss Kelly's appeals process with Oscar. Frank thought Linda was enabling Kelly's behavior by maintaining contact with her. Oscar told his parents that he didn't want to hear updates about Kelly or discuss her situation. He said he needed to focus on his own family and couldn't handle constant reminders of what had happened. Linda respected Oscar's wishes but we could tell she was struggling with the division in her family. She had always been close to both of her children and didn't know how to navigate the situation. Emma continued to grow and develop normally throughout this period. She started sleeping through the night at 8 weeks old and began smiling responsibly around 10 weeks. These milestones provided some positive focus during an otherwise difficult time. I returned to work when Emma was 12 weeks old. My principal and fellow teachers had been supportive throughout the situation. Several colleagues brought meals during Emma's first few weeks and offered to help with childcare if needed. Oscar's work relationships were more complicated because some of his coworkers knew about Kelly's arrest through local news coverage. The story had been reported in the newspaper with headlines about fake government workers. Oscar found it embarrassing to discuss and tried to avoid conversations about his family. Kelly was scheduled to be eligible for parole after serving 9 months of her sentence. The parole board would consider factors including her behavior in prison and her completion of required counseling sessions. Update 3: Kelly was released on parole in September, after serving 10 months in prison. She had to complete community service hours and continue attending counseling sessions as conditions of her release. Linda told us about Kelly's release even though Oscar had asked not to receive updates about her. Linda said she felt we should know because Kelly was living back in town and we might run into her at stores or other public places. Kelly found a job at a grocery store on the other side of town. She was living in a small apartment and had to check in with her parole officer twice a week. According to Linda, Kelly was following all the requirements of her parole and hadn't caused any problems. 2 weeks after Kelly's release, she showed up at our house on a Saturday afternoon. Oscar was in the backyard working on fixing our fence when she knocked on the front door. I was inside with Emma, who was 6 months old by then. I looked through the window and saw Kelly standing on our front porch. She looked thinner than before and her hair was shorter. She was holding a small gift bag and kept looking around nervously. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called Oscar's name and he came running around from the backyard. When he saw Kelly through the window, he told me to call the police. He said her presence at our house violated the restraining order we had filed as part of her plea agreement. Kelly saw Oscar through the window and started talking loudly. She said she just wanted to give Emma a gift and apologize in person. She placed the gift bag on our doorstep and said she would leave if we would just listen to her for 5 minutes. Oscar opened the door but didn't invite Kelly inside. He told her that she wasn't supposed to be at our house and that she needed to leave immediately. Kelly said she had been thinking about us every day in prison and needed us to know how sorry she was. Kelly asked if she could see Emma, even if it was just for a minute. She said she had bought a stuffed animal and wanted Emma to have it. Oscar told Kelly that she would never have any relationship with Emma and that she needed to accept that. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes before Kelly finally left. She took the gift bag with her when she walked back to her car. Oscar watched from the window until she drove away, then called the police to report the violation. Kelly's parole officer contacted us the next day to discuss the incident. She said Kelly would face additional restrictions and possible jail time for violating the restraining order. Kelly claimed she didn't understand that bringing a gift constituted contact. The parole officer recommended that Kelly be required to move to a different county as a condition of continuing her parole. Kelly agreed to relocate rather than return to prison. She moved about 2 hours away and found another job at a restaurant. Oscar's relationship with his parents became strained after Kelly's visit to our house. Linda had told Kelly our address when Kelly said she wanted to send Emma a card. Linda didn't think Kelly would actually show up in person. Frank was angry with Linda for giving Kelly our address. He said Linda needed to choose between supporting Kelly and maintaining a relationship with Oscar and Emma. Linda said she couldn't choose between her children and wanted to help both of them. Oscar decided that his parents couldn't visit Emma unsupervised anymore. He said Linda had proven that she couldn't be trusted to respect our boundaries regarding Kelly. Linda was upset by this decision but agreed to the supervised visits. We started having Linda and Frank over for dinner once a month instead of the weekly visits we had been doing. The dinners were pleasant, but there was always an underlying tension about the topics we couldn't discuss. Emma celebrated her first birthday in October with a small party at our house. We invited Oscar's parents, my parents, and a few close friends. Kelly was not mentioned during the celebration, but I noticed Linda looking sad when Emma opened her presents. Kelly sent a birthday card to Emma through Linda, but we returned it unopened. Oscar told his mom that any communication from Kelly needed to stop completely. Linda said she understood but asked if there might be a time in the future when forgiveness would be possible. Oscar told Linda that he couldn't imagine ever having a relationship with Kelly again. He said that what she had done wasn't just a mistake or poor judgment, but a calculated plan to harm our family. The level of deception involved made it impossible for him to trust her again. Currently, Emma is 14 months old and walking everywhere. She says a few words and loves to play with blocks and stuffed animals. She doesn't know anything about what happened before she was born and we plan to keep it that way for now. Kelly has stayed away from our area since her relocation. Her parole will end next summer and she will no longer be required to check in with an officer. We hope that the physical distance and time will help her move on with her life without involving our family. Oscar and I don't discuss Kelly anymore unless something requires our attention, like legal updates or parole violations. We focus on raising Emma and maintaining our own relationship. The experience taught us to trust our instincts and question things that don't seem right, even when they involve family members. Linda still talks to Kelly occasionally, but she doesn't share details with us. Frank has not spoken to Kelly since her sentencing and says he doesn't plan to have a relationship with her in the future. The family will probably never be the same as it was before, but we have accepted that reality and moved forward with our lives. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. Father demanded I cancel my wedding because my husband had a tumor. When I didn't, he demanded to pay back every penny he ever spent on me. I, 28F, got married to my husband Jack, 31M, last month. My father David, 56M, has always been a difficult person to deal with. Growing up, he always made everything about himself. My childhood was filled with instances of him turning every situation into a story about his struggles or achievements. When I was 8, I won a school art competition. Instead of celebrating my achievement, Dad spent the entire evening telling everyone at the celebration dinner about how he used to be a talented artist but had to give up his dreams to support his family. He even pulled out his old sketches and made everyone look at them while my award sat forgotten on the table. My parents' marriage was strained throughout my childhood. Mom tried to shield me from their arguments, but I often heard Dad yelling about how she didn't appreciate his sacrifices. He would storm out after these fights and disappear for days, only to return with expensive gifts and act like nothing happened. When I was 12, Mom finally had enough and filed for divorce. Dad made the entire divorce about himself, telling anyone who would listen how he was the victim of a cruel wife who didn't understand him. The divorce was messy. Dad used me as a pawn to get back at Mom. He would promise to take me on trips or buy me things, then cancel at the last minute claiming Mom had somehow prevented him from following through. He'd then spend hours on the phone with his friends and family, talking about how the divorce was destroying his relationship with his daughter. Mom never said a bad word about him to me, but I could see how his behavior affected her. When I was 15, Dad married Sarah, 45F. Sarah was different from Mom. She seemed to know how to handle Dad's narcissistic tendencies. She would redirect conversations when he started making everything about himself and somehow managed to keep him relatively stable. They had my half-sister Emma, 12F, a few years later. I thought having a new family might help Dad change, but he just found new ways to make everything revolve around him. I went to college in the same city to stay close to Emma. During my college years, Dad would only call when he needed something or wanted to talk about his problems. When I graduated with honors, he gave a speech at my graduation party about how my success was due to his excellent parenting and financial sacrifices. He barely mentioned my actual achievements. Then I met Jack. He was different from anyone I'd ever dated. He was kind, patient, and actually listened when people talked. Dad initially didn't pay much attention to our relationship. He was too busy dealing with some work drama he'd created. When Jack and I got engaged last year, Dad's reaction surprised me. He seemed genuinely happy and even offered to contribute to the wedding expenses. Looking back, I should have known it was too good to be true. Dad spent the entire engagement period telling everyone how he was the one who taught me to have high standards in choosing a partner. He would corner Jack at family gatherings and give him long lectures about how lucky he was to be marrying into our family, completely ignoring the fact that Jack came from a wonderful family himself. The real problem started 2 weeks before the wedding when Jack began having severe headaches. After several tests, the doctors found a benign tumor that needed to be removed. They assured us it wasn't immediately life-threatening, and we could proceed with our plans. The surgery was scheduled for 3 months after the wedding. Jack and I discussed it thoroughly and decided to go ahead with the wedding as planned. When I told Dad about Jack's condition, expecting some support or concern, his reaction was purely self-centered. He immediately started calling everyone in the family, acting as if he was the one most affected by the news. He called Jack's parents without our permission to discuss contingency plans and started telling people he might have to support me financially if anything happened to Jack. The day before the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, Dad insisted on giving a speech. I was nervous about it but didn't want to create drama by refusing. What followed was 20 excruciating minutes of him talking about himself. He started with how he survived his divorce from my mom, moved on to how he built a successful career despite numerous obstacles, and then began crying about how difficult it was for him to see his daughter marrying someone with health issues. Jack's parents were visibly upset. His mother had tears in her eyes, but not the happy kind you expect at a rehearsal dinner. Jack sat there, humiliated, as my father essentially turned his medical condition into a sob story about himself. Sarah tried to get Dad to sit down, but he pushed her away and continued his monologue about how proud he was of himself for staying strong through all of this. Emma, who was supposed to be our flower girl, started crying because of all the tension in the room. When I finally got up and asked Dad to leave, he created an even bigger scene. He started shouting about how ungrateful I was and how no one understood how difficult this was for him as a father. He actually said, "How do you think I feel, having to walk my daughter down the aisle knowing her husband might not be around long?" The actual wedding day was even worse. Dad showed up drunk, despite Sarah begging him to stay sober. During the ceremony, when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, Dad stood up swaying. Everyone froze as he announced that he needed to express his concerns about the timing of the wedding given Jack's health issues. He started rambling about his paternal duty to protect me from making a mistake. Security had to physically remove him while he yelled about being a concerned father who only wanted the best for his daughter. The ceremony continued, but you could feel the tension in the air. Sarah left with a crying Emma, apologizing profusely on Dad's behalf. That night, instead of celebrating our marriage, Jack and I had to deal with Dad's Facebook rant about how his daughter chose a sick man over her father's wisdom and love. I blocked him on all social media and my phone. Sarah keeps trying to mediate, saying Dad is just processing his emotions in his own way and that I need to understand how difficult this is for him. Emma texts me saying she misses me and wants everyone to get along. Meanwhile, Dad has been telling our extended family that I'm being cruel by cutting him off when he's just worried about my future. Several family members have suggested I should forgive him because that's just how he is, but I'm done letting him make every situation about himself. This was supposed to be about Jack and me starting our life together, not about him and his feelings. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since the wedding disaster, and the situation has spiraled out of control in ways I never imagined. I thought blocking Dad on everything would give us some peace, but he's found new ways to insert himself into our lives and cause chaos. Last week was Jack's pre-surgery consultation. We specifically didn't tell anyone in Dad's family about the appointment to avoid any drama. However, Sarah somehow found out from Emma, who had overheard me talking to Mom about it on the phone. Sarah, thinking she was helping, told Dad about it because she believed he deserved to know his family. The consultation was scheduled for 10 a.m. Jack and I were sitting in the doctor's office, discussing the procedure details when Dad suddenly barged in. He hadn't even bothered to check in at reception, he just walked straight through looking for us. The doctor was in the middle of explaining the surgical approach when Dad interrupted, demanding to know the real survival rates and potential complications. The surgeon tried to maintain professionalism and explain that the tumor was benign and the procedure was routine, but Dad wouldn't listen. He kept interrupting with questions he'd clearly gotten from WebMD, insisting that the doctor might be hiding something. He even pulled out his phone and started recording the conversation, saying he needed evidence in case something went wrong. Jack remained remarkably calm, but I could see how uncomfortable he was. The surgeon had to stop the consultation and call security when Dad refused to leave. While waiting for security, Dad started crying and telling the doctor about how he'd already lost so much in life and couldn't bear to see his daughter become a widow. The doctor looked completely bewildered as Dad went on about his own health problems and how stressed this situation was making him. Security finally arrived and escorted him out, but the damage was done. The hospital had to reschedule our consultation, and now they flagged Dad as a security risk. We've had to arrange for extra security measures for the actual surgery day, which has added unnecessary stress to an already difficult situation. But Dad's interference didn't stop there. A few days after the hospital incident, Jack got called into his boss's office. Apparently, Dad had been emailing and calling Jack's workplace repeatedly over the past week. He somehow got hold of his boss's contact information, probably through some mutual acquaintance, and had been trying to convince them that Jack was too sick to work. Jack's boss showed us the emails. Dad had written long, detailed messages about how Jack was hiding the severity of his condition and how continuing to work might kill him. He even suggested that the company might be legally liable if anything happened to Jack at work. He tried to pressure them into putting Jack on indefinite medical leave, claiming it was in everyone's best interest. Thankfully, Jack's boss is a reasonable person who knows him well. Instead of taking Dad's claims seriously, they immediately informed us about what was happening. But the incident left Jack feeling humiliated and worried about his professional reputation. He's worked hard to build his career, and the last thing he needs is my father trying to sabotage it. The situation got even more complicated when I discovered Dad had been meeting with a financial advisor. Sarah let it slip during one of her attempts to mediate between us. Apparently, Dad has been exploring ways to secure my future because he doesn't trust that Jack has adequate life insurance or savings. He's been telling the advisor and anyone who will listen that he needs to prepare for the possibility of supporting me financially when Jack inevitably becomes unable to work. The most infuriating part was finding out that Dad had contacted my mom. Mom lives in another state and has maintained minimal contact with Dad since their divorce. Last weekend, she called me in a panic, thinking Jack was dying. Dad had called her with an exaggerated version of Jack's condition, claiming that I was in denial about the severity of the situation and needed her intervention. It took me hours to calm Mom down and explain that while Jack's condition is serious, it's treatable and his prognosis is good. She was furious when she realized Dad had manipulated her emotions just to create more drama. Even after all these years, he still knows exactly how to push her buttons. Emma has been caught in the middle of all this mess. She's only 12, but she's old enough to understand what's happening. She texted me yesterday saying Dad makes her feel guilty whenever she mentions wanting to see me. He tells her that I've abandoned the family by choosing Jack over them and that she shouldn't get too attached to me because I might disappear like her mom did with her first family. Sarah continues to make excuses for him, saying things like that's just how he processes stress and he really does love you in his own way. She expects me to forgive him and move forward because family should stick together. She even suggested that I should let Dad come to future doctor appointments because excluding him is only making his anxiety worse. I'm at my wit's end. Jack's surgery is in 2 months, and instead of being able to focus on his health and recovery, we're constantly dealing with Dad's interference. The stress of managing Dad's drama while trying to prepare for Jack's surgery is becoming overwhelming. Every day brings a new crisis or attempt to insert himself into our lives, and I'm running out of energy to deal with it all. Update 2. 2 months have passed since my last update, and we've discovered something that puts all of Dad's previous behavior in an even more disturbing light. Sarah reached out to me privately last week, and what she revealed explains a lot about Dad's extreme reactions to our situation. It started when Sarah was looking for some work documents on their shared home computer. She found a folder labeled Family Security that contained hundreds of audio files. Out of curiosity, she opened a few and was horrified to discover that Dad had been secretly recording our family conversations for the past year using his phone. He had recordings from family dinners, private conversations between Jack and me at their house, phone calls he'd had with various family members about us, and even conversations from my bridal shower. The most disturbing part wasn't just the recordings themselves, it was what Dad had done with them. He'd been using audio editing software to cut and splice conversations, creating misleading versions that made it sound like I had serious doubts about marrying Jack. In one edited clip, he'd taken a conversation where I was expressing normal pre-wedding jitters and cut it together with comments I'd made months later about being worried about Jack's health. The result made it sound like I was having second thoughts about the marriage because of Jack's condition. Sarah found dozens of these manipulated recordings on the computer. Dad had been playing these edited versions for family members, using them as evidence that I needed his intervention. He'd even created a compilation that he'd played for Jack's parents, trying to convince them that their son was hiding the true extent of his illness from everyone. The recording included out-of-context snippets of Jack discussing his headaches before his diagnosis, edited to make his condition sound much worse than it is. When Sarah confronted him about the recordings, Dad didn't even deny it. Instead, he tried to justify his actions, claiming he needed to document everything in case something happened to Jack, and I tried to blame him for not warning me. He showed Sarah a whole timeline he'd created, mapping out every conversation and interaction, with notes about how they proved he was right about Jack's health being a reason to delay or cancel the wedding. Sarah was horrified by the extent of his deception. She finally realized that his behavior went far beyond just being overprotective or processing stress badly. She packed some bags and went to stay with her sister, taking Emma with her. For the first time since I've known her, she's not trying to excuse or justify Dad's actions. Emma called me crying the day after they left. She revealed that Dad had made her keep secrets too. He'd ask her to tell him whenever she heard me talking to Mom on the phone, and he'd make her feel special by saying she was helping protect the family by reporting back to him. She feels guilty now, realizing he was using her to spy on me. The fallout from this discovery has been intense. When confronted by several family members, Dad doubled down on his position. He claims he did everything out of love and concern for me. In his mind, he's the hero of this story, a father doing whatever it takes to protect his daughter from making a huge mistake. He genuinely seems to believe that manipulating and editing these recordings was justified because it served his purpose of proving he was right about Jack. Sarah is now considering divorce. She told me she's found other disturbing things since she started looking closer at Dad's behavior. Apparently, he's been keeping detailed notes about Jack's daily schedule, including when he goes to work and returns home. He even hired someone to follow Jack to and from his doctor appointments, claiming he needed to know if Jack was seeing other doctors or specialists that we weren't telling the family about. The most recent development is that Dad has started sending these edited recordings to my mom's family members, trying to get them on his side. He's created a narrative where he's a concerned father being pushed away by his daughter who's been brainwashed by her sick husband. Several relatives have called me, confused and concerned, after receiving these manipulated audio files from him. Update 3: It's been 6 months since the wedding, and I'm finally ready to share how everything turned out. Jack's surgery was successful, and he's been recovering well. However, the drama with Dad continued right up until the operation day and beyond. On the morning of Jack's surgery, Dad tried to force his way into the hospital. Despite the security measures we'd put in place, he showed up at 5 a.m., hoping to catch us before the procedure. When security stopped him, he created a huge scene in the lobby, screaming about his rights as a father and threatening to sue the hospital. He even tried to convince the medical staff that he had power of attorney over Jack's medical decisions, showing them some obviously fake documents he'd created. After being removed from the hospital, Dad filed a formal complaint against the facility, claiming they were denying him access to family during a medical crisis. He hired a lawyer to challenge the hospital's security protocols, arguing that as the father of the patient's wife, he had a right to be present. The hospital's legal team quickly dismissed his claims, but the whole incident added unnecessary stress during Jack's recovery period. Sarah filed for divorce last month. She finally reached her breaking point when she discovered Dad had been recording Emma's private conversations with her friends, supposedly to make sure no one was turning his daughter against him. She's moved in with her sister permanently and is fighting for full custody of Emma. The divorce proceedings have revealed even more disturbing behavior. Apparently, Dad had been monitoring Sarah's emails and phone calls for years, claiming it was for family security. Emma started seeing a therapist to deal with the impact of Dad's actions. She's struggling with trust issues after realizing how her father manipulated her into spying on family members. However, we've been working on rebuilding our relationship without Dad's interference. She spends every other weekend with me and Jack, and it's been healing for all of us. Dad's last attempt to control the situation came when he tried to convince our extended family that Jack was faking his illness for attention. He created an elaborate presentation using WebMD articles and out-of-context medical terms, trying to prove that Jack's symptoms didn't match his diagnosis. When that failed to get him the support he wanted, he switched tactics. Last week, I received a certified letter from his lawyer demanding I repay all the money he ever spent on me. The letter included a detailed list dating back to my childhood, everything from school supplies to the wedding contribution. He claims I breached the father-daughter contract by cutting him off and denying him his rightful place in my life. His lawyer also included a threatening note about going public with his evidence about Jack's deception if I didn't comply. I've now gotten a restraining order against him. The evidence Sarah provided about his recording and stalking activities made the process straightforward. She's been incredibly supportive, sharing more information about his concerning behavior during their marriage to help strengthen the case. Dad's response to the restraining order was to send a mass email to everyone we know, claiming he's the victim of a conspiracy between his ex-wife, current wife, and daughter to destroy his reputation. Most family members have stopped taking his claims seriously, but he's still trying to find ways to contact us through distant relatives or mutual acquaintances. I'm finally at peace with my decision to cut him out of my life completely. Jack's recovery is going well, and we're focusing on building our future together. Sarah and Emma are doing better away from Dad's influence, and we're all healing from the damage he caused. Sometimes cutting toxic people out of your life is the only way to find peace, even if they're family.